So which of the 16 types are worst and best at relationships? No idea, but I can speculate. So I'm kind of bunching relationships together here, so family, friends, colleagues, romantic partners. So a type might be very good at one, but terrible at the others, in which case they won't be ranked highly. ENTPs. Where do we start? ENTPs are the type who probably have the greatest variety of relationships in their life. Mainly this is because they don't always know how they feel about people. And that's a very weird notion for some types, but I think that the ENTPs out there will know what I mean. This is double-edged because they'll have lots of people in their life who are just floating around in an unclassifiable way, meaning they won't feel settled in lots of their relationships, but at the same time, they'll be able to make use of people that others might simply not be friends with. In romantic relationships, like some of the other types, there's definitely an exponential growth that comes with maturity for them. When ENTPs are younger, their romantic relationships will not exist if they can help it. At their worst, they enjoy being around people, but dislike them. And at their best, they really love people and treat their relationships seriously. I'm going to put ENTPs in average, just because it takes them a long time to get there when it comes to managing their relationships well and in a non-chaotic way. But when they do get there, they're absolutely great. Okay, ESTJs. Relationships are obviously a combination of lots of different elements. Things need to work well. In some sense, a relationship needs to be a well-oiled machine where both parties, or however many parties there might be, need to have their stuff together. People need to pull their weight and do their duty. ESTJs are excellent at this side of relationships. They could never be accused of not putting in the effort to make a relationship work better. In the workplace, they're going to be equally hardworking. So what's the catch? Well, it's that pesky little inferior introverted feeling. This tends to, in my understanding and experience, have two consequences. One is that they're often out of touch with their own feelings and values. The second is being out of touch with other people's feelings and values. This is where the stereotype of them bulldozing over people's feelings comes from. This is a shame since they're one of the most caring types, yet they just go about it in a way that isn't always appreciated. An ESTJ family member will make sure that you're up on time, you're eating right, and are just going about life in a good and well-structured way. It's extremely useful stuff, often the basics that so many people just mess up or neglect. They're definitely going to run into emotional issues though. I think I'm actually going to put them down the bottom in needs some work. Okay, ISFJs. ISFJs possess a soft energy whilst being solid as a rock. They rarely be the ones who will start an argument with people, since they'll use their extroverted feeling to interface with people so that they come across socially graceful in a grounded way. This will permeate all of their relationships in a predominantly positive way. They desire and are paragons of stability. So what issues are they going to run into with people? Well, relationships can be chaotic because people are chaotic, and this isn't something that ISFJs are too fond of in any area of their life. So they might struggle with those kinds of people and situations. Is that going to occur much in their lives? Probably not. So all in all, I think ISFJs are going to have excellent relationships in most areas of their lives. Stable, consistent, dependable, strong, and unlikely to stir up issues and trouble. I think I'm going to put them at the top in great. ISFPs. ISFPs know how they feel about the people in their lives, and they're very good at judging people correctly and seeing them accurately. Although anyone could be susceptible to this, I'd say they are less likely to misjudge a person and therefore get into a terrible relationship. And if they do happen to do that, they learn from it very quickly and won't make the same mistake twice. My point is that one of the easiest ways to be good in relationships is to be very selective about who you let into your life in the first place. And I think they're very good at this. When they are in relationships, they definitely have the capacity to be uncompromising by virtue of their FI. They're really not people that are easily bossed around, and certainly resist any form of control from another person if it's something they don't agree with. That being said, they often have enough emotional intelligence to navigate these waters. Kind of surprised by this one, but I think I might put them at the very top with the ISFJs in great. ESFJs. Obviously the social arena is where ESFJs can naturally shine, although limiting them to just that is obviously unfair. The charm and people skills of ESFJs have been discussed at length, along with their underrated wittiness. There is an issue though. They are a type who is imbalanced on their feeling and thinking functions. As a result, there are certain types that will naturally clash with them under certain situations. I'm not sure whether these are big enough issues to be thought of as blind spots for them, but for example, when they're having a discussion with a high TI user, conversations can become pretty heated arguments quite quickly. It's like they're speaking different languages. It's not a fault on either of their parts, just an organic clash. I'm not sure that I've seen many ESFJs deal with this that well, so I'll be mean because it's enjoyable. I put them in good as opposed to great. Okay, ISTJs. ISTJs are a weird one because although they can be very blunt and not the best at being socially graceful, they tend to be very reliable and stable, and actually, in my experience, enjoy being in relationships, ones that function well. It's something that they'll invest a huge amount of energy and effort into. A relationship, ideally, is something that offers a level of certainty and structure to your life, and this will be very appealing for ISTJs. Although they don't have their feeling function high, it's still something they value a lot, so they understand the fact that other people will feel similarly strongly about their own values as they do, which can give them a level of empathy and insight into other people. With workplace relationships, I think ISTJs are going to be pretty okay. There's a bit of a clash here in my theoretical understanding of ISTJs versus my experience with them. I think that ISTJs are more likely to come across badly or bluntly to strangers. But with people they know, I've seen them be absolutely great. Perhaps for the first time ever, ISTJs in one of these ranking videos are going at the very top. I'm quite surprised by that one, I must say. INFJ. INFJs are pretty socially smooth. It's typically in their nature to adjust and tailor their approach to account for the person they're dealing with. They'll morph into whatever is the most useful incarnation of themselves. This, on the surface, makes them excellent in relationships of all kinds. However, there is a catch. Their tendency to be the ones who bend creates a natural imbalance where they might be giving more than they're getting without letting the other person know that's happening. Consequently, there might be moments where things blow up, where suppressed feelings erupt. Although this tendency is definitely a recurring theme they'll experience if they don't invest time in fostering a certain level of disagreeableness, I don't think this is something that is going to be hugely destructive. So on balance, I'm going to put them in good. Okay, ENFPs. ENFPs always, somehow, end up being likable, even lovable at times. They are very fluid people, and their relationships can very much be that way as well. If INFJs can be many things to many people, then ENFPs can be many people. This allows them to charm their way in and out of people's good graces pretty effectively. All of the EP types can handle themselves with people when they need to, but also tend to bring about situations in which they actually need to handle themselves. At their best, they're great inspirers, motivators, and energizers. At their worst, they're still pretty good, so let's put them in good. ESFP. ESFPs and ISFPs are very similar, to be honest. Although the ESFP stereotype probably doesn't reflect this at all, they're actually exceptional when it comes to people and relationships. That being said, the sometimes extreme nature of that imbalance between their SE and their NI can cause issues because other people struggle to handle it. They're very much chaos monkeys, and it can take quite a long time to get used to it. One good way to think about them is that they're very good wartime generals, so to speak. If you're having an argument with them, they can be, again, totally against the stereotype, surprisingly rational and clear-headed. It's like they're very well calibrated for crisis situations and handle them well, but in peacetime, day-to-day situations, they can be a bit too intense. I think I'll put them in good. ENFJs. These guys are going to be great at relationships. Possibly even too good, to the point where the relationships in their lives get more attention than other things. People compel them in the positive and negative sense of the word. If there is a human on offer, so to speak, they'll take them, even when people are more of a distraction than a benefit in the moment. To be fair though, if you're going to be good at something, then managing relationships would be at the top of the list, since so many things occur as the result of that area of your life being in order. When you compare them to INFJs who might have commensurate people skills, but are introverts, and have extroverted sensing as their inferior function, meaning they're going to feel more chaotic in certain interactions, ENFJs on the other hand can simply deal with that much better. Relationships are things that are going to push you around a bit. So rolling with the punches is useful, and their SE gives them that ability. I'm going to put them, unsurprisingly, at the top in great. ESTPs. ESTPs might have a stereotypical reputation for, in romantic engagements or entanglements, as the case may be, being very fond of variety, let's say. However, in my experience, they're very loyal once someone gets close to them. It's something they take extremely seriously. The problems come when people try to restrict them or box them in. They're very sensitive to having their freedom entrenched upon, so trying to get them to commit is not something that can ever be forced. Ironically, the best way to keep an ESTP, so to speak, is to not try to. Contrary to how they might be in their youth with their romantic relationships, I think that overall, they're going to be okay with their relationships with people. Maturity is definitely their friend in this respect. Can I put them in good? Probably. I think that if you're one of their people or in their clan, then they'll be absolutely great. But in general, I'm going to put them with their ENTP cousins in average. Okay, INFP. I must say that I look at INFPs as being often gentle, empathetic, kind, yet still uncompromising in many respects. And relationships are often defined by a level of compromise, which can be difficult. Perhaps they might also have a tendency to be idealistic to a fault about what to expect from people in relationships. Like many things in life, they can disappoint INFPs and their particular standards for things. Does their capacity to be uncompromising automatically mean that they'll be unreasonable in a relationship? Not necessarily. They're actually much more rational and pragmatic than the stereotypes portray them to be. There is nothing about INFPs that points me in either direction, so I'm going to put them in average. Okay, INTPs. So with the exception of the 7,000 people on the Discord server, I don't actually know many INTPs. And the ones I do know tend to be younger. I think INTPs are actually well suited for relationships in a lot of ways, especially when it's someone who is compatible and can keep the ship afloat in certain ways, let's say. I've noticed that you need to look after INTPs to a certain extent. INTPs value stability in their lives, and they actually just like people a lot too. They don't always want to be in the same room as them, but same house. Sure. I think that getting into relationships might be a bigger challenge to them than being in them. Finding like-minded people to be friends with can be equally challenging, but then again, once they do, things can be great. I'm going to put them as decent or average, but they can definitely be higher or lower. INTJs. INTJs are a type for whom the difference between a younger or less developed version and a mature version is huge when it comes to people and relationships. A less mature INTJ is going to have all of the problems you'd naturally expect, being awkward, socially oblivious, even unintentionally or intentionally offensive. But a well-developed INTJ is someone who is going to maximize all of their relationships, and not just the functional components of them, but the emotional side too, mastering both the pragmatic and the passionate. So I think I'm going to be nice here and assume we're dealing with a mature version of this type, in which case I'm going to put them not at the top, but just underneath in good. ENTJ. So I've mentioned maturity here a few times. This applies to ENTJs. They get better as they're more mature. But even when more mature, ENTJs still have a tendency to be quite abrasive and lacking in what humans would commonly refer to as emotions. Inferior introverted feeling is certainly an issue for them, and being able to appreciate and pick up on other people's motivations and values and even perspectives is something that can be missing or just very difficult for them. This is an irony that pops up with quite a few different types, and that is that ENTJs actually see themselves as very straightforward to deal with and are constantly perplexed by the way that other people, at least in their view, overcomplicate things by not communicating directly or bluntly. I think the biggest mistake that ENTJs make is to assume that brutal honesty will ever go down well, even when it's for the person's benefit. And the mistake that people make when dealing with ENTJs is to take the way in which they deliver a message personally. It's just the way they communicate and talk. I can see ENTJs having issues in lots of different areas of their life when it comes to relationships, which is actually a huge shame, because if people knew how to handle them better, which isn't easy, you'd realize that they make kind of the best partners. Sorry guys, but I'm going to put you at the bottom. If that makes you feel bad, then what better place to rise up from? This is a tricky one because they're not going to do well on this ranking, but there is a caveat to that. They have a combination of traits, which comes from their functions, which make people particularly annoying to them. ISTPs are straightforward in their approach to communication. They tell it like it is. To them, that's the most principled way and also the most logical way to approach most situations, prioritizing TI over FE. So when they have to contend with the fact that every interaction and relationship requires, for want of a better phrase, lots of political considerations, a certain level of schmoozing, appeasing, and finesse to make sure that certain triggers aren't pulled on or emotional landmines stepped on, they not only struggle, but usually actively just don't want to play that game. Here's the caveat though. They're actually really easy to deal with once you understand their view on things. It might take a little while for people to realize this about them, but once you get on their wavelength, you really do know exactly where you stand with them. Nonetheless, I'm going to have to put ISTPs down the bottom in need some work. Any ISTPs in my life, don't be offended. Just come to my office and we can discuss this further. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and even consider hitting the dreaded notification bell. We've also recently set up a Discord server, so feel free to join that if you want to chat to people or just lurk in the shadows. The link is in the description below.